Rome remembers him as emperor, but Rome did not make him. He was born far from marble palaces, in the salt air of Africa's coast, a boy of Leptis Magna, carved by ambition, hardened by war. He rose not by privilege, but by the sword. And from Africa he marched into Rome, and took the empire for himself. This is the story of Septimius Severus, the African who ruled Rome. Leptis Magna was no backwater. A busy Mediterranean port in what is now Libya, it had been a Phoenician Punic settlement turned Romanized city, a mercantile hub that shipped olive oil and timber across the empire. Into that multi-ethnic world on April 11th, 145, Lucius Septimius Severus was born, the scion of a local elite family that mixed Punic roots with Roman citizenship. His family's name, the Septimi, had local prestige, but Rome's capital and its circles of power were still far away. Severus's early life gave him a rare edge. He was at home on the coastline of North Africa and later inside Rome's corridors of power. That blend, provincial grit plus Roman schooling, would shape how he ruled, first as a soldier, then as an emperor who trusted only the army and his own advisors. Severus climbed the cursus honorum, local magistracies, then a steady march through senatorial ranks. He was repeated times a provincial commander, a consul, a thinker who knew both Latin law and the blunt realities of frontier warfare. When the year 193 CE exploded into violence after Commodus's assassination, a vacuum opened, and Severus's legions proclaimed him emperor. At a stroke, a man from Leptis became head of a Mediterranean superpower. Once proclaimed, Severus moved fast. He crushed rivals in civil war, secured the Senate's grudging acceptance, and created the foundations of what later historians called the Severan dynasty. But central to his rule was a clear, unglamorous message: empower the army, and the rest will follow. Severus reshaped power. He raised soldiers' pay, relaxed senatorial monopolies on command, and rewarded loyalty with land and titles. These were practical changes, cash in hand for legions that had grown restless after the chaos of the late 2nd century. But they also changed the character of the empire. Rome's government, long a mixed system of senatorial privilege and imperial prerogative, slid toward a more military monarchy where emperors ruled by armies first and law second. He used those new tools ruthlessly. Political rivals were sidelined, Senate privileges trimmed, and a new court culture formed around the emperor and his inner circle. That tight vertical power would allow Severus not only to survive fractious politics, but also to project force across distant frontiers. Severus's reign is often remembered in two theaters, the East and the North. In the East, he undertook campaigns against Parthia, advancing Rome's hold and parading eastern riches back to the capital. In the North, he marched into Caledonia, modern Scotland, determined to secure the uneasy frontier that had bled Rome for decades. It was on campaign in Britain that his life ended, in Eboracum, modern York, in February 211. Severus's British War has a moral and a myth. Militarily, it was a costly show of force. Rebuild forts, press the frontier, and make legions loyal. Politically, it was a signal to would-be usurpers that Severus still had the muscle to enforce Rome's borders and the will to ride with his men. That rugged style, constant campaigning, constant presence with the troops, won him loyalty, but it also drained the treasury and set a tone of rule by soldiery that would have long-term consequences. If you like this kind of myth-busting history and want the full playlist on African rulers who shaped Rome and the Mediterranean, Hit subscribe now and check out the Africa vs. Rome playlist. Drop a comment with which figure you want debunked next. Severus died in campaign, far from his North African home, on February 4th, 211. He left a clear, if tragic, legacy. 2 sons, Caracalla and Geta, who were supposed to rule together. That delicate arrangement collapsed within the year. Caracalla had Geta murdered in late December 211, and with that fratricide, the Severan inheritance became a reign of violence and purge. The political lesson was brutal. Militarized succession and favoritism towards soldiers had stabilized the emperor's position in the short term, but it made the dynasty brittle and personal rivalries lethal. Severus never forgot Leptis Magna. He poured resources into his hometown, public buildings, monuments, and a lavish harbor, transforming it into one of Rome's most striking provincial cities. That architectural amends are still visible today in the ruins, and UNESCO names Leptis as one of the best surviving Roman port cities because of his patronage. Historically, Septimius Severus is a paradox. He saved Rome from immediate collapse and reinforced its frontiers. He was a pragmatic reformer who made the legions loyal. Yet his model, power cemented by soldiers and court, shifted the empire towards centralized autocracy and paved the way for the instability of later decades. For Africa, his story is also a reminder. Imperial power could start on the Mediterranean rim as much as inside Rome's marble heart. Severus gave Rome discipline, marble, and a dynasty, and he rewired how emperors clung to power. From a port that smelled of salt and oil, a man remade an empire. If you want more of these untold connections between Africa and the ancient world, the generals, queens, and kings who shaped history, subscribe to Silent Dynasties, hit the bell, and watch the Africa vs. Rome playlist next. Which line in Severus's life surprised you most? Drop it in the comments.